In 2013, 767 million people were reported living on under $1.10 a day. We will take an in-depth look into two philosophers who take different views on if it is our job to save those people living on $1.10 a day, so to save the people who are living in poverty and famine around the world. We'll take a look at Singer, who believes it is our sole purpose in life to help those in poverty and in famine relief. And we'll look at Hardin, who believes we ought not to do anything for the poor because it only makes things worse for them. So first we'll take a look at Singer. Singer presents us first with an example known as the drowning child example. You're on your way to work and you pass a child drowning in the lake. And you could be late to work, you could ruin your shoes, or the child could be far away. Do you have to save the child? According to Singer, you ought to save the child. And this is because it is not morally relevant if you ruin your shoes. It is not morally relevant how far away the child is. And it is not morally relevant if you're late to work. We ought to save the child drowning in the lake. And Singer relates this to a worldview because it's not morally relevant how far away, or if we lose a small sum of money, or if we lose a large sum of money, or no matter how far away or what we lose, it is not morally relevant to whether or not we save the children. So in the introduction, it was stated that 767 million people live under $1.10 a day. So this is our severe demand to help those people. It is a requirement that we meet the needs of those 767 million people, because if we don't, their death is ultimately on our hands because we could have done more to help. So Singer presents us with another example of the Bugatti example. And Bob had spent his whole entire life saving money for this Bugatti, and he spent his whole retirement fund on the car. And ultimately, one day, Bob has an option to save his car or save a child when a train is coming towards both. And Bob can either flip the lever that saves the child and diverts the train towards his car, or he can not do anything, and he can let the child die and save his car. And Bob chooses to save his car, which Singer believes is wrong, because it is our moral obligation to save the child. And Singer is relating this to famine relief because he believes it is our moral obligation to do everything we can to save a child. It doesn't matter if we lose our retirement fund or a small sum of money, because Singer believes we ought not to work towards our retirement fund, or to work towards a life towards friendships, or a life for self-gain or anything. We ought to live a life about giving back and saving others, no matter how far away they are or at what loss it is to us. We ought to save children. So then Hardin takes a different look at our role in famine relief and poverty. And Hardin believes that if we help those in need, we do more harm than good. And he first presents us with a lifeboat metaphor. So you're in a boat and there are people drowning around you, and you have three options. You can either save everyone in the water and the boat sinks and you ultimately all die. You can save 10. Do you pick the first 10 you see, or do you pick the best 10 on the water? Or you can save none at all. And Hardin believes that we ought to save none. And he relates this to a worldview of those in poverty and those in famine, because the world is currently in a lifeboat situation. We're overcrowded and we're trying to save too many people. We're trying to start too many charities. We're trying to help too many people. And so the world is growing at an extremely fast rate, and if we try and save everyone, we risk doing more harm than good, and then we could ultimately die. So we're not doing the world any favors if we try and save everyone. So then we're presented with a tragedy of the commons, which explains if we use up all of our space and all of our resources to help those in poverty, then we ultimately hurt ourselves as well, because there will be none left for us. He uses an example known as the tragedy of the commons. So there's a big field, and there's incentives for the more cows you get to come and graze on that field. And so people and farmers are bringing their cows to this field to let them graze so they can meet the incentives. And it's all good and well until you run out of grass, you're overcrowded, there's too many cows on the space, and there's no more space for anyone else, and there's no more grass. And Hardin believes that this is what's happening in the world. This is what was happening in the world because we ultimately are running out of space for us. We're using up all of our resources and all of our work on other countries and all of our money, that there's going to be nothing left for us. And we're going to run out of space, and the world will be left with deforestation, air pollution, overpopulation, if we try and save too many people. And this relates to the tragedy of the commons this relates to the World Food Bank, because if we're establishing these World Food Banks that set up food delivery to countries around the world, and the World Food Banks are international depository reserves that are set up to aid countries that are diseased or when disaster strikes. The problem, though, according to Hardin, with these World Food Banks is that we're setting up a reliance for the third world countries to rely on the first world to come in and save them anytime there's any problem. So they never have to help themselves because America will ultimately come in and bring them food. This relates to the ratchet effect, which if we continue to give food to third world countries, then we are creating a form of dependency. And the people in the third world country will come to rely on us, and they'll start to overpopulate. And if we continue to help them, then we'll only increase their population. And this will only cause problems for us because the world is already at maximum capacity. Therefore, if we continue to help them, then we are only causing more deaths. Hardin's theory holds true that we ought not to give to famine relief because it will only result in more deaths, because it will lead to overpopulation, which can lead to air pollution, which can lead to contaminated water sources, which can lead to deforestation. So ultimately, we will be causing more deaths than lives we are saving. And this is a map that relates to undernourished countries in the world. And here we have America and Europe, and they are suffering from very little, if any at all, undernutrition. And then we have Africa, parts of South America, parts of Asia, all around here. And they're suffering. And there's even countries in the red with extreme malnutrition. And this relates to what we're talking about in this article, because we can either take Singer, who says that there are 2/3 of this world is suffering from famine and poverty relief. And then there's us, all good. So it is our moral obligation to save those 2/3 of people suffering, no matter how far away we are, no matter how much money it could take, no matter what. It is our moral obligation to save. And then there's Hardin, who looks at these countries and say, if we continue to help them, then it's only going to get worse and create a form of dependency. And they're not going to learn how to make food for themselves, and they'll ultimately be dependent on us. So this enhances the argument because it gives you a look at, is it our job? And so in conclusion, there are currently 66 million school-age children going to school hungry. So is it our job to save those children? Singer and Hardin both present us with thought-provoking and interesting arguments surrounding whether or not it is our job to give to those countries. So as an American and as a United States citizen in a first world developed country, we have to decide how much we ought to give.